Want the perfect picture? Keep your distance from the royal horses.
She'd been planning this trip to London for 8 months. The flights, the hotel, the itinerary, everything carefully arranged around a single photograph she had seen on someone else's Instagram 11 months earlier. A mounted soldier in full ceremonial uniform, silver breastplate catching the afternoon light, horse standing absolutely still beneath him. The stone arch of horse guards framing everything perfectly behind. She had saved the image to her phone and looked at it probably 200 times between then and the morning she landed at Heathrow. She knew exactly where she wanted to stand, exactly what angle she needed, exactly how close she had to get. That last part was where things went wrong. Her name was Claire. She was 26, and she had no bad intentions whatsoever. That is worth saying clearly, because what happened to her that afternoon on Whitehall was not the result of malice or disrespect. It was the result of not knowing something that nobody had ever told her, something that is not written on the tourist information boards outside the arch, not mentioned in the travel blogs she had read, and not covered in any of the dozens of Instagram posts she had studied for composition tips. She crossed the rope, not aggressively, not dramatically. She simply stepped over the low barrier that separates the public viewing area from the space immediately around the horses, took 3 steps forward, raised her phone, and positioned herself directly beside the horse's head for the shot. The horse was a dark bay standing at the left side of the arch. His name, in stable records, was Aurelius. He was 9 years old and had been on post duty for 3 years. He was not an excitable animal. He had stood through thunderstorms, through bus engine failures directly outside the arch, through the controlled chaos of New Year crowds on Whitehall. He was, by any cavalry measure, a steady horse, but a person appearing suddenly at close range, directly beside his face from the direction outside. His primary field of vision was a different thing from any of those. His head came up. His weight shifted back onto his hindquarters, one step sideways, then another, moving him away from the source of the sudden presence at his shoulder. The trooper held him, quietly, without visible drama, with the kind of immediate physical communication between rider and horse that happens below the level of anything a bystander can see. Aurelius stopped moving after 2 steps. Then the trooper spoke, not shouting, not aggressive. A clear, direct, carrying voice that reached every person standing within 30 feet of the arch. Please step back behind the barrier. The horses can be startled. Step back now. Claire stepped back. Her phone was still raised. The photograph she got, the one she had planned, for 8 months, showed a horse, with its head up and its ears back, and a trooper looking directly at her rather than at the middle distance. It was not the shot she had imagined. She stood behind the rope for the next 20 minutes, waiting for the moment to settle, trying different angles, eventually getting something that worked. She posted it that evening with a caption that described what had happened honestly, including the part where she had crossed the rope and the part where she probably should not have. That post got more engagement than any photograph she had ever taken, because what she had accidentally documented was not what she went to horse guards to find. She had gone looking for stillness and ceremony. What she found when she got too close was the living reality underneath it, a trained animal with genuine instincts, and a soldier whose job was to manage both the animal and the situation without ever losing his composure. That turned out to be a far more interesting story than a perfect photograph would have been. The horses at horse guards are not decorations. That sentence sounds obvious when written down. Of course, they are not decorations. They are living animals. But the way people behave around them suggests that something about the ceremonial setting causes the brain to process them differently. The gleaming uniform on the rider, the polished kit, extraordinary stillness of the whole scene. It creates an effect that is closer to a museum exhibit than a stable yard. And people treat museum exhibits differently from how they treat animals. They reach out to touch them. They make sudden movements to try to get a reaction. They position themselves in spaces that any experienced horse person would immediately recognize as dangerous. They do all of this not from cruelty, but from genuine misunderstanding of failure to connect the image in front of them with the biological reality underneath it. Here is what those horses actually are. Each cavalry horse, head horse. Guards is typically a warm blood or Irish draft cross. Standing between 16 and 17 hands, they weigh somewhere between 500 and 600 kilograms. A horse that size moving suddenly in a confined space, the narrow arch at Horse Guards. With stone walls on both sides and a crowd pressed in from the front, can cause serious, not because the horse is aggressive, because it is large and heavy, and when it decides to move, it moves faster than most people expect. The training that prepares these horses for post-duty takes between 2 and 3 years. It begins with basic groundwork and advances through progressively more challenging environments. Traffic, crowds, loud noises, flags, umbrellas opening suddenly, children running, bicycles, camera flashes at close range. Each horse is assessed continuously throughout this process. Many do not complete it. The ones that do have been systematically exposed to almost everything a city environment can produce. Almost everything. Not quite everything, because the specific combination of factors that creates a dangerous moment at the arch. A person appearing suddenly in the horse's blind spot, at close range from an unexpected direction, while the horse is in a heightened state of alertness from long post-duty, is difficult to replicate fully in any training environment. Trainers know this. Riders know this. It is why the barrier exists and why the barrier matters. A horse's eyes are positioned on the sides of its head, giving it a very wide field of vision, nearly 360 degrees. But that positioning also creates 2 blind spots, directly in front of the nose and directly behind the hindquarters. A person approaching from either of those directions, particularly at speed or with sudden movement, enters the horse's awareness in a startling way rather than a gradual one. This is the piece of information that most tourists do not have. When they step over the rope, they are not approaching an exhibit. They are approaching a large animal with prey instincts and 2 blind spots and 5 or 6 hours of post-duty building in its muscles, managed by a rider whose entire job at that moment is to hold everything together without making any of the tension visible to the crowd. The best photograph of a horse, Elgard's horse, is taken from behind the rope. Not because the rules say so. Because from behind the rope, the horse is relaxed, its ears are forward, its posture is natural, and the light catches the breastplate of the rider exactly the way it does in every photograph that made someone plan a trip to London in the first place. The moment someone crosses that rope, all of that changes. The ears go back. The head comes up. The horse becomes an animal, managing a perceived threat rather than a subject. Standing calmly for a portrait, no photograph taken from that position has ever looked as good as the one that could have been taken from 2 meters further back. Nobody asks the troopers what it is actually like. Tourists ask them to smile, blink, react to jokes. These questions go unanswered. But when former troopers have been asked in interviews what actually happens inside the stillness, how a rider manages both horse and crowd across a 2-hour rotation, the answers are more interesting than most people. Expect 2 hours mounted in full ceremonial kit. The breastplate weighs several kilograms. The helmet sits high and affects balance. The boots are rigid. The gauntlets limit hand feel on the reins. And through all of it, the trooper is doing several invisible things simultaneously. He is managing the horse not dramatically but continuously. Small adjustments of weight and leg and rein that keep the animal settled. A horse standing still is not a passive state. It is an active one, and the rider is in constant low-level conversation with the animal. Through his body the entire time, he is monitoring the crowd, not with obvious visual sweeping that would break the posture, peripherally, continuously. Reading movements and noise levels the way a driver reads traffic without staring at any single vehicle. He is tracking, without appearing to track, anything moving toward his horse. He is maintaining his own physical and mental state across conditions that range from August heat radiating off stone surfaces to January sleet. Both require the same external presentation, and occasionally he is managing an incident. Someone crossing the rope is the most common. Children running at the horse from close range is another. Sudden, loud sounds from the street happen regularly. On political event days, protesters sometimes choose the arch as a backdrop, placing shouting and signs directly beside animals trained for this kind of exposure, but tested by it nonetheless. In every situation, the response is the same: minimum intervention required. Voice first, always. A clear, direct instruction without anger. If that resolves it, and it almost always does, the response stops there. The trooper returns to stillness as quickly as the horse returns to calm. What former troopers describe is not frustration. Most describe something closer to focus. The incident cuts through the repetition of a long post. It requires immediate assessment and immediate action. It ends quickly. The post continues. One former lifeguards trooper said in a regimental interview, "You stop seeing it as an interruption. It is part of the post. The post includes everything that happens at the post. Your job is to manage all of it and hand the position to the next man in the same condition you received it." That is what 2 hours at Horse Guards looks like from inside it. The stillness is the visible part. Everything managing the stillness. The barriers at Horse Guards did not always exist in their current form. In earlier decades, the boundary between public and mounted sentries was less clearly marked. Photographs from the 1970s and 1980s show tourists standing directly beside the horses, hands on their necks, faces inches from their noses. It looked harmless. Occasionally it was not. In the late 1990s, a horse was startled by a tourist who walked directly behind it for an unusual angle photograph. The horse kicked. The tourist was struck on the lower leg and required hospital treatment. No charges were filed. The barriers at that time did not clearly prohibit that position, but the incident triggered a review that resulted in clearer demarcation of the restricted area around the sentries. In 2009, a more serious incident occurred when a group of young men surrounded one of the horses and began making sudden, loud movements from multiple directions simultaneously. The horse reared. The trooper held his seat. The horse came back down without striking anyone. Police intervened and removed the group. The footage circulated widely enough to generate a formal response from the Ministry of Defense, clarifying the legal position on interference. With military horses on duty, that legal position is clearer than most visitors realize. The horses at Horse Guards are working military animals. Interfering with a military working animal is an offense under the Animal Welfare Act, and in certain circumstances under military law, a trooper ordering someone to step back is not making a personal request. He is issuing a lawful instruction in the course of military duty. Failure to comply has resulted in police involvement and formal cautions on more than one occasion. Over time, the regiment has worked to improve how information reaches visitors before they reach the arch. Signs are more prominent. Boards in the courtyard explain the nature of the guard and the reasons for restrictions. Officers during the daily changing ceremony position themselves to guide visitors naturally rather than confront them after the fact. None of this has eliminated incidents. It has reduced them. The fundamental challenge remains unchanged. People arrive having seen a photograph that looked effortlessly accessible, and they want to recreate it without understanding what made the original possible. The original photographer almost certainly stood behind the rope. The rope is not there to keep people away from something impressive. It is there to keep the impressive thing exactly as impressive as it appears. Cross it, and everything changes. Stay behind it, and everything remains. That has always been the whole secret. There is a photograph that professional photographers in London know about and tourists almost never find. It is not taken from the front of the arch where the crowd gathers. It is taken from the far side of the courtyard, the Horse Guards parade ground, looking back through the arch toward Whitehall. In the late afternoon, when the sun sits low in Western, the light passes through the arch and catches the horses and riders from behind, silhouetting them against the brightness of the street beyond. The arch frames them like a painting. The crowd on Whitehall dissolves into the light. The horses seem to float. Everything compresses into a single image that holds the full weight of what this place actually is. Nobody is in that shot, because tourists don't know the courtyard exists. The entrance is through the arch itself, a passage most visitors walk past while looking at the horses rather than the space behind them. Getting this photograph requires exactly one thing: staying behind the front rope. Walking through the arch on the permitted pedestrian side and turning around. No special access. No credentials. No early alarm. Just the knowledge that the thing you came to photograph looks entirely different and entirely better from the other side. This is a small metaphor for everything about horse guards that gets missed when people focus only on how close they can get. The closer you press toward the rope, the less you see. Step back far enough, and the whole picture assembles itself. Horses, arch, clock tower, flag, the long straight line of Whitehall running in both directions. Claire went back the following morning. She arrived early. She stood behind the rope and let the light settle. Then she walked through the arch, turned around, and raised her phone from the parade ground. She crossed no barriers. She approached no horses. She did not need to. The photograph she took, two riders silhouetted in the arch against the morning light, became the one she kept permanently at the top of her profile. 8 months of planning. One mistake. One lesson. One quiet morning with the right angle. She wrote underneath it, "I went to get a close-up and came home with a perspective." That is the real souvenir of horse guards. Not a photograph of a horse with its ears back at 3 feet. Not a video of a trooper telling you to move. The souvenir is the understanding that the distance the rope asks you to keep is not a restriction. It is an instruction on how to see. Stay back. Let the scene settle. Give the horses the space they need, and what appears in your frame will be something that no amount of closeness could ever produce. One of the oldest living traditions in the world, doing exactly what it has always done. For no audience in particular, and for every audience at once, the perfect picture was always there. You just had to stand in the right place to find it.